Hi there. Can you hear me okay in the back? My voice doesn't carry super well. We're going to hit the highlights today of our TMDL implementation plan for the City of Poulsbo. I hope that you walk away with an understanding of how we implemented our TMDL requirements, why this project is important for our community, and a little bit about what we accomplished and hopefully some nuggets that will help any of you that have to deal with the TMDL process. If you haven't been to Poulsbo, we are a small city with a population of about 10,000. The city is roughly 6 square miles and we surround the water body of Liberty Bay. Historically, we've grown at a rate of about 2%, and currently we're growing closer to 5%. We do anticipate that we will reach our GMA population growth of 15,000 within the 20-year planning period. The thing about the growth is it does give us the opportunity to retrofit our infrastructure and also build new infrastructure the way that we want it to be. If you can see in the photo that's there, the red is Poulsbo, and we are at the heart of what is the Liberty Bay watershed. As most of you know, Ecology initiated the TMDL process in 2008. They completed the study for Liberty Bay in 2013, and water quality standards were identified as not being met for our water body, specifically in fecal coliform. It was determined that actions were necessary to improve water quality, and we initiated our TMDL process. It's currently not a part of our NPDES permit, but it is important that we show progress so that it does not become part of our TMDL permit. For a little local context, people come to Poulsbo because of our waterfront recreation. It is a tourist community as well as a wonderful place to live. And the Liberty Bay waterfront is truly part of what is the culture and the identity of our community. This is important because this is what the citizens think about when we ask them to raise their rates. It's what our council thinks about when we tell them that stormwater is important. It's interesting to look at commercial shellfish harvest history in Liberty Bay. 50 years, it was robust. If you take a look at the picture from our historic society, you can see the shells stacked up there, and that's what was happening in Liberty Bay 50 years ago. The water body was downgraded in roughly 1967, and shellfish was closed for harvesting in 1990. The Suquamish tribe is our local tribe, and they have been working very hard to reestablish shellfish in Liberty Bay harvesting, and they're currently on target working with Ecology to reestablish shellfish harvesting in a portion of the bay by 2018. It's really important to us that we're not part of the reason why shellfish harvesting isn't an option in Liberty Bay. Our stormwater program was established in the early 90s, and it was in 2014 that we proactively raised our rates for stormwater. Historically, they had been $8 a month. We raised them to $16 a month, and this was before we started our TMDL implementation plan. Our council was very supportive of us raising the rates. Those rates in 2014 were the highest in the region, and they are still the highest in the region. I noticed this morning when King County shared the rates across all of the jurisdictions in King County, $200 was the highest rate for the year, and that's what we are. So the thing that was important to our council when we raised rates was that we show the value for our investments in stormwater. And that's a huge part of what the implementation plan does, is it helps to measure progress, and then it also shows the value. With the money from raising rates and basically doubling our revenue, we were able to add 2 people on the operations side of the house to help maintain our system. When we started the implementation plan, we put together a group of stakeholders, which included the health district, which does our sampling. We were fortunate that Chris May and Mindy Phone from Kitsap County were part of that team, as well as representatives from the community and from developers. It's important to note that we deal directly with the Suquamish tribe. We consider them more than a stakeholder and more than a partner when it comes to things like water quality and the environment in our region. Just another quick note on why this is important. The water quality compliance goal was identified as 2018, and our goal is to show that we're making progress. We want ecology to understand that with the resources available, the City of Poulsbo is doing the absolute best job that they can, and we obviously don't want this TMDL to become a mandate as part of our permit. One of the things for context, and you don't have to read this slide, but it's important that it has a lot on it, is in Poulsbo we meet the minimum requirements for our NPDES permit. We also go above and beyond that. And when I talk about above and beyond, in the last 10 years we've done 18 retrofit projects. We proactively manage the private facility maintenance, inspections, and compliance. We work closely with the Kitsap Conservation District on rain gardens. We have an exceptional outreach program and education program. Basically, we meet all the minimum requirements and we go above and beyond in all the areas that we can. One of the biggest things that we can get out of an implementation plan or any planning process is the lessons that we learn. It's really an education process for our council. It's also an education process for our technical staff. Phil Struck has led the effort on our TMDL implementation plan, and I'm going to let him walk through the process that we went through and share that with you. The big message from our elected officials is that results are important and we must show progress. They wanted to see that we had planned and prioritized our investments, and I believe that you'll see we are doing that. They understand that monitoring is expensive. As this process went on, we basically doubled the amount of monitoring that we're doing. And at the technical level, this product gives us the ability to benchmark and understand what's important and really consider everything at the watershed level as well as the sub-basin level. And I believe it's given us a tool to share information that's important regionally as well as in Poulsbo. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Diane. My name's Phil Struck, and I'm going to talk about some of the technical elements of the plan. Really, the goals of the TMDL implementation plan very similar to a conventional basin plan, watershed plan, stormwater comp plan, with a few distinctions. Really, we're wanting to get to a tool that helps inform decisions and actions, and try and tie BMPs to water quality response. But I think the main difference is we're really going at this from an outcome-oriented goal. And the outcome is compliance with the water quality standard, as opposed to implementing regulatory requirements like code updates or O&M or all the things that are typically associated with a stormwater comp plan. So the technical elements, again, very kind of standard stuff here. We did a watershed assessment, looked at needs, O&M, spent a lot of time on capital and structural components, then looked at some costs and financing, and then some time on, what's the right level of effectiveness monitoring for a small community. So the watershed assessment, really looking at characterization, evaluation of the BMPs that have been implemented, looking at that relative to water quality monitoring. One of the things that's really nice about this project is that it is a fairly small watershed, about 20 square miles. The city's about a third of it, and you can see on the TIA map the most 90% of the impervious surfaces are within the city. And then along with that, there's a very strong data set. There's almost 20 years of continuous monitoring data to help inform any trends and responses to watershed activities. So some of the stuff that we went through, the outfall mapping, there's 40 some outfalls in the city. We did do a kind of a focused synoptic sampling event looking at wet and dry seasons, and really the goal there was to collect some information to link back to Ecology's TMDL study that they did about 8 years ago. Then we combined that with looking at, well, what's happened in the watershed over the last 8 to 10 years. And really, the city is a large component, but not the only component. This is a non-point source problem. And it's more than stormwater. It's all the things that happen in the watershed. It's on-site septics, small-scale agriculture. So you can see three maps here. The first is the on-site septic corrections done by the Kitsap Health District on their pollution identification and control. So 40 corrections there, the big investment in their program in this basin. The Kitsap Conservation District, a multi-year program, 20-some ag BMPs, and then the city's stormwater program with all the retrofits as well as their enhanced O&M program. So well over $10 million investment over about an 8-year period. So, people wanted to know, is this making a difference? And how big a difference, and can you tie these actions to what's going on in the water? That's kind of the bottom line, right? Here's just, it's a smattering of the typical retrofits. You guys have all seen this, but the city's doing, bioretention, some Green Street stuff, parking lots, a bit of permeable pavement. A lot of it's been funded in part by the Department of Ecology. The city's had a very good relationship with the state and implementing retrofits. So here's the key findings. And a lot of this stems from a 3-year study that was just completed by the State Department of Health to recertify the shellfish beds. It's been completed, but they have not released their final determination, but the indication is that a large portion of the bay will be recertified. And you can see why. The trend graph there on the right is from this station at the head of the bay, which has been historically where the highest levels of fecal coliform have been measured. And we're looking at a 20-year trend line there, and it's a pretty significant reduction. So the study showed that all 29 stations in Liberty Bay over that 3-year period met the standard, which is an excellent outcome. Also looked at the stream loading. That's where the TMDL is applied in this basin. The allocations happen on the upland basins. And the same sort of trend almost across the board. There's a couple basins where the trend reduction is not quite as strong, but overall a very positive trend. So just a quick comment on the load allocation. The state study put a lot of effort into allocating loads to the bay, right? And the intent being to identify a reduction that's needed in order to attain the water quality standard. And you can see that little exhibit up there in the right corner. The quality's not that great, but the Department of Ecology identified 33 separate basins with specific load allocations. And those aren't really a standard per se, at least not yet. They're more advisory. We looked at that and we found that information to be kind of somewhat helpful in terms of tracking and source evaluation and as a benchmark, but not really had that much utility in terms of implementing the program responsibilities, because there's just so much variability in water quality data and stormwater data and fecal coliform data. So the load allocation component of the TMDL plan has some value, but it was not highly significant. We also looked at fish and wildlife habitat, mostly from a water quality perspective, and the kind of the main component here I want to point out is that text box on that figures showing the pre-spawn salmon mortality. And at our breakfast presentation this morning, the opening remarks, he spoke toward this issue of contamination and salmon. And this is what he's talking about. In the South Fork Dogfish Creek, there's, depending on the year, anywhere from 10 to 50% of the returning salmon, which are coho, are dying before they spawn. And the toxic mechanisms, not known for sure, but we know that it is highly related to typically runoff from high ADT roads. So, an important piece of information. We looked at stormwater treatment areas, what's treated, what's not, the main outcome being that the older portions of the town did not really have a lot of treatment infrastructure. No big surprise. Also looked at some toxics, mostly in terms of bioaccumulation. Nothing really jumping out in Liberty Bay, pretty standard relative to other moderately developed urban embayments. Emerging water quality concerns, there are some issues that they're keeping an eye on, mostly related to eutrophication. Seeing larger, more dense blooms of the Noctiluca phytoplankton and also larger blooms of jellyfish. And I think there's studies going on in ecology that suggest that it's related to nutrient loading, possibly some climate change as well. So this is kind of the next tier of water quality issue underneath the fecal coliform, which is really kind of a surrogate, I believe, for a lot of other contaminants. So we prioritized based on the water quality data and the impervious area, really trying to get to a sub-basin level of detail where projects are identified and implemented. Looked at, after we identified those areas, really what is the need and what's the opportunity? What's going to work best in that specific location? One of the things about Poulsbo that is a little bit of a constraint is the soil conditions are really pretty poor. Infiltration's not an option in most places in the city. And it wasn't all about structural capital projects. There were educational components, enhanced O&M, pollution identification. So it's kind of the big picture approach using all the tools in the toolbox. Went through a capital project ranking, pretty standard stuff here, looking at a variety of metrics, scoring different projects, trying to identify which ones are highest priority. Came up with about 20 projects with about a $15 million CIP cost, mostly concentrated in the older parts of town. This is the kind of the template we use. We identified, it's conceptually each project, what the main elements would be and what those costs would look like. And then again, pretty standard stuff here. Here's the CIP list. The main issue being that there was a capital gap. Not enough money for all the projects. Kind of a common dilemma. So how to address that? So Diane and her team went to the city council, gave them the information and the options. The options being get some more revenue, scale back the CIP, or do some combination. And the decision that was made was to try and bring in some more revenue. So the city looked at a general facility charge for their stormwater system, which is becoming more and more common, particularly in Western Washington. And a GFC is essentially just buying some capital share of the existing system. We looked at what some of the other municipalities were doing, kind of set it up on an impervious surface unit basis, which is 3,000 square feet, and came up with about $1,200 of a general facility charge for a new single-family residence in Poulsbo. And the council approved that, and there was very little, if any, controversy from the public. And I think it's on its way to generating somewhere in the range of $200,000 a year. The effectiveness monitoring plan, it's really about generating data that helps show whether your program is working and what changes might be needed to make it work better, right? So what's the right EMP for a small city? You've got the regional EMP going on. You've got BMP-specific effectiveness monitoring happening. What's the best balance for a small municipality to generate data that helps inform their decisions on an ongoing basis? Fortunately, for Poulsbo, the health district has an excellent monitoring program for ambient conditions, and that really helped to focus the city's effectiveness monitoring down to their annual monitoring, their outfalls, add some streams, and then do a little analysis every year as part of their annual stormwater management plan to see how they're doing, and then dedicate some funds to make it happen. So in summary, it's a very effective report. I think it helped educate, it helped inform, and helps to support the city's adaptive management program. With that, since I went a little bit over, I think I'll go right to questions.